Hi there, this is Alan, and I am currently in Riverside, Iowa.
And we were talking about the Shatner thing in Riverside.
Have you guys done this type of stuff before?
Yeah, with friends. Chekhov chocolate and the Romulan raspberry and the Vulcan vanilla, and we did all that.
When was it, Ford was in for the first shuttle mission, it went out that they had named it the Constitution. The fact of the matter was that President Ford was a closet Trekkie. And he didn't want the first shuttle to be called the Constitution because the first shuttle was never going to fly. He wanted the second shuttle to be named the Enterprise because it actually was going to. But $1.5 million letters went in to get it changed, and almost $1 million he bowed to it, and it took almost $1 million to change it because you can't just ready to fly. So there were machinations that were beyond the obvious, and one of the major things happened with me because they absolutely said she cannot be on the bridge. She cannot be on, because Gene Roddenberry cast me. Sent for me from, I was in Europe, and he sent for me and cast me less than 2 weeks before the show was bought, less than 2 weeks before we were supposed to shoot the first episode, right? They said she cannot be part of the cast. You have to do something else. And Gene said, they said, you didn't even ask us. And Gene said, of course I told you. I told you that they said, you told us that you were going to add a little color to the bridge. We thought you meant the costumes. This is the honest to God truth. It sounds like a joke, but it's the honest to God truth. If you recall, my first costume, and in only one show, was a pea green, which takes all the color out of my face. A lot of people wear it very well, but I can't. So Gene said that's a great idea, and he changed the costume to red. Voila, they had a little color on the bridge. In the entire first year, and my co-stars did not know it, I worked without a contract. I worked as a daily, because Gene talked to my agent and said, please tell Nichelle Nichols, I want her on this show. She's vital to this show. They can't stop me from hiring a daily, but they can stop me from giving her a contract.
Well, that's not exactly true. Because I didn't have a contract in my first series.
I have no idea what you're talking about. It wasn't because you were a black woman.
No.
And so, what Gene did was place me behind Bill Shatner. And every time he did a close-up, they had to shoot me. And so they had to give me more lines. The writers all wrote great scripts for me. And then I got the pink pages and the blue pages and the purple pages and the orchid pages, and then cut. You witnessed it. At the end of that year, I went to Gene Roddenberry, told him I was leaving the show. He said, stay. I think you all know what happened to me, Dr. King, and I stayed. I got a contract the next year because he said I was having a Gene Roddenberry originally did not want to write was not writing a science fiction film. He wanted to write about the human condition between men and women of all races that reflect America and reflect outward the world, and thereby have high drama So when I went to interview for the role before Paramount and NBC knew I was going to be on, the role had not been written, and I read a scene that they asked me to read that was 3 characters. Somebody named Kirk, somebody named Bones, and somebody named Spock. And they asked me if I would read for this role of the person named Spock. And I said fine, because it was a long scene and he had a big part. And I thought this was the role. And I said, tell me something about this character. What is she like? And they looked at me like I was crazy and said, Spock is not a she, Spock is a he. We just haven't written your role yet, but we can see from here. And I said, well, tell me, could she be a woman? And they said, yes, but Leonard Nimoy would not like it. And so I said, well, tell me something about the character, and I'll read as though I was reading for the character. Make a long story short, I got the role. But I took my reading from what they told me Spock was about. In developing that character, and I told Gene Roddenberry about it when we decided on the book I was reading, which was a treatise on Africa called Uhura. He said he wanted to use that, but I said, why don't we do an alliteration on it, because he said it was too harsh. And I said, make it Uhura. And he said, you named your character, it belongs to you. And I said forth then, he said, and you come from the United States of Africa, I just decided. And I decided then, from the character that I read, that I wanted to be very much like that character, but in a feminine way. And Gene said, and I was sharing this with George the other day, when I told him that I thought of Spock as my mentor, because if you remember, Uhura was the only one he was able to teach the Vulcan lair to. And she sang and spoofed on Spock. Now, you could have never had a love scene in '63 between Uhura and Spock. But there were several hints, and Gene was indeed kind of beginning to follow that. And he said he wanted to do episodes, if we had gone past the 3rd year, because this was about the 3rd year we were talking, he wanted to do episodes that got into all of the stars' life, so that you had not 1 star, 2 stars, and supporting cast, which we really are not. But that was the essence of that. And JJ was a big Star Trek fan. And he invited me to lunch, and I told him about my creating the character. Whether he got, and why, my relationship with Spock. Whether he got that idea from there, I don't know. If he took it and ran with it and thought, wow. And having said that, he might very well have then said exactly where, been coming from exactly where Walter really realized it. That would have you all sitting here going, what was that? When did that happen? So it shocked me a little bit, but
it was a fun part. We looked at it from Riverside, of course. Captain Kirk is supposed to be born here. They had an alternate reality, obviously, born in outer space.
yes.
But this was the first movie that Riverside's actually been named in. They had worked at the Riverside shipyard.
Right.
And